The sound of the old car engine still echoed in Daniel's memory, even after 35 years. He could recall the way the tires crunched on the gravel road, the smell of rain mixed with exhaust, and the trembling hand of his godmother holding his. He was 6 years old, dressed in a too-big sweater that hung off his shoulders. The woman knelt before him, her face pale, eyes red from crying. "Be a good boy, Daniel," she whispered, her voice barely holding together. "We'll come back soon. I promise." He wanted to believe her. He really did. But when the iron gate of St. Mary's orphanage slammed shut behind her, something inside him broke. The sound wasn't loud, just final. Inside, the nuns smiled gently, their voices soft, practiced. They had seen this scene too many times. Children left behind with stories about temporary stays and family problems. Daniel didn't understand what any of it meant. He only knew that his godparents were gone, and no one had come to explain why. At night he would lie awake on the narrow bed, listening to the other children whispering about the families who might come for them. He never joined those conversations. Deep down, he already knew no one was coming for him. The first winter in the orphanage was cruel. Frost crept through the thin windows and Daniel would press his small hands against the cold glass, watching cars pass on the road beyond the fence. Each pair of headlights made his heart race with hope, until they disappeared. Slowly, he learned to stop hoping. Years passed, and Daniel built a wall inside himself. By 12, he had become the quiet boy who read in corners. Books became his only escape, worlds where people got second chances, where promises were kept, and love always returned. When one of the sisters asked what he wanted to be when he grew up, Daniel said softly, "Someone who doesn't get left behind." When he turned 18, he left the orphanage with nothing but a faded photograph, his parents holding him as a baby. They had died in a car accident when he was only 5. His godparents, a couple named Michael and Teresa, were supposed to raise him. Instead, they vanished from his life without a trace. Adulthood brought stability, but not peace. Daniel became a high school literature teacher, the kind of man students liked but never really knew. He married young, had a daughter named Lily, and built a modest home filled with laughter and books. Yet, every once in a while, something in his wife's eyes would remind him of the promise that broke his childhood. Sometimes late at night, he'd scroll through social media, typing names into the search bar. Michael and Teresa Coleman. No results, nothing. It was like they had erased themselves from the world. One night, as rain tapped softly on his window, his phone buzzed with a notification. A message request. The profile picture showed an older man with gray hair and kind, weary eyes. The message read, "You don't know me, but I think I know who you are." Daniel frowned. He reread the words. Then another message appeared. "I've been searching for you for years. I owe you an explanation." "About your godparents?" His breath caught. The world around him seemed to blur. He hadn't spoken that word, godparents, in decades. He hesitated for a long time, fingers hovering over the keyboard. This could be a mistake, a scam. Or maybe after 35 years it was the truth knocking on the door of his life. Finally, his trembling hands typed a single reply. "Who are you?" If someone messaged you claiming to know the truth about your childhood, would you want to hear it? Or would you rather keep the pain buried? If you're drawn into Daniel's story so far, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because what comes next will turn everything he believed upside down. Daniel stared at the screen long after sending that single question. The reply came a few minutes later. "My name is Richard. I knew your godparents. In fact, I was there. The day they left you." For a second, Daniel's heart stopped. His hand froze over the phone as if it suddenly weighed 1,000 pounds. "There, the day they left you." The words cut deep, reopening a wound he had buried for most of his life. He leaned back in his chair, eyes wide, his mind spinning through fragmented memories. A woman crying, a man pacing by the car, the smell of rain. He typed quickly. "Why? Why did they do it?" Richard didn't respond right away. Daniel waited, staring at the little gray dots that blinked on and off as the man typed, then stopped, then started again. Finally, the message appeared. "It's not what you think. They didn't mean to abandon you. They were forced to." Forced to? Daniel's pulse quickened. Every nerve in his body screamed for clarity. He typed again, more desperate this time. "What are you talking about? Forced by who?" But no answer came that night. He didn't sleep. He sat by the dim light of his desk lamp, rereading the messages, trying to make sense of them. Every hour that passed only deepened the ache in his chest. When morning came, he looked exhausted. His wife, Anna, noticed immediately. "Are you okay?" she asked as she poured him coffee. "Yeah," he lied, forcing a smile. "Just couldn't sleep." Anna studied him for a moment longer but didn't press. Daniel had always been private about his past. He rarely spoke of the orphanage or his childhood, and she had learned to respect the silence around it. Later that day, while his students read quietly in class, Daniel found his mind wandering. Forced to. The phrase wouldn't leave him. What could have possibly made his godparents abandon him? And if they had been forced, why hadn't they come back? That evening, he returned home and opened his laptop again. There was a new message waiting. "Daniel, I think you deserve the truth. I've carried this secret for too long, but it's better told in person. Can we meet?" Daniel hesitated. Every instinct told him to be cautious, but curiosity, and something deeper, almost like hope, pushed him forward. "Where?" he typed. The reply came instantly. "I live in Portland now. Same city as you, actually. There's a cafe on Pine Street. Tomorrow at 5 p.m., I'll be there." Daniel's heart raced. He hadn't told the man where he lived. How did he know? The realization sent a shiver through him. He showed up anyway. The next day, the cafe was almost empty, the smell of coffee mixed with the faint sound of rain outside. At a corner table sat an older man with a cane resting beside him. His gray hair was neatly combed, his eyes sharp yet kind. When Daniel approached, the man stood slowly and extended his hand. "You've grown," he said softly. "You look so much like your father." Daniel froze. "You knew my parents?" Richard nodded. "I was their friend. And your godfather, Michael's business partner." Daniel sat down, his heart pounding. "Then tell me, why did they abandon me?" Richard sighed, his gaze lowering. "Because if they hadn't, you might not be alive today." The words hung in the air like smoke. Daniel blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" Richard looked up, his eyes filled with a pain that seemed to come from decades ago. "Your godparents were in danger, Daniel. They didn't leave you because they didn't love you. They left you to save you. Would you be able to forgive someone who abandoned you if you learned they did it to protect you?" Daniel couldn't move. His mind struggled to catch up with what Richard had just said. "They left me to save me?" It sounded like the kind of lie adults tell children to make cruelty seem kind. He leaned forward, his voice low but sharp. "Save me from what?" Richard hesitated, looking down at the cup of coffee between his hands. His fingers trembled slightly. "From the people your godfather owed money to," he said. "Michael got involved with the wrong crowd. It started as small business loans, but soon it was more than he could control." Daniel frowned. "You mean criminals?" Richard nodded. "Loan sharks. Dangerous ones. When he couldn't pay, they made threats. Not just to him, to you too. They knew your parents had left you some inheritance money, held in a trust. They wanted it." Michael panicked. He thought if he disappeared, they'd stop looking. Daniel's heart pounded. "So they just left me at an orphanage?" "It wasn't supposed to be permanent," Richard said quickly. "He planned to come back when it was safe, but they never got the chance." The room fell silent except for the soft hiss of the espresso machine. Daniel waited, dreading what he was about to hear. "What happened to them?" he finally asked. Richard's voice dropped. "They were killed in a car accident, 3 days after they left you." Daniel's breath caught. He felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. "That's impossible. I would have been told." Richard shook his head. "The police never identified them. The car was burned beyond recognition, and there was no ID left inside. I only learned the truth later when the police linked the vehicle to Michael's business." Daniel sat there, stunned. 35 years of silence suddenly had a reason darker than he had ever imagined. He looked at Richard. "Why didn't anyone tell me? Why didn't you tell me? Richard's eyes watered. Because I was afraid. The same people who went after them, they were still out there. I thought if I came forward, you'd be in danger too. I told myself I was protecting you by keeping the secret. Daniel's voice cracked. You weren't protecting me. You were protecting yourself. Richard didn't argue. He just nodded, shame spreading across his face. You're right. The two men sat in silence. Outside, rain began to fall harder, streaking down the cafe windows like tears. Finally, Daniel stood up. I spent my entire life thinking I wasn't wanted. That they just left me. Do you have any idea what that does to a kid? Richard looked up at him, his voice trembling. I do. That's why I reached out. Because I couldn't live with the guilt anymore. And because I have something that belongs to you. From his coat pocket, he pulled out a small, worn envelope. The edges were yellowed, the paper thin with age. Daniel hesitated before taking it. What is this? Your godmother's last letter, Richard said softly. It was never sent. I found it after they died. Daniel felt his throat tighten as he opened the envelope. Inside was a folded piece of paper, written in delicate handwriting. He could barely make out the faded ink. My dear Daniel, if you're reading this, it means we failed to come back for you. Please, never believe that we stopped loving you. Everything we did was to keep you safe. One day, the truth will find you. And when it does, I hope you can forgive us. His vision blurred as tears filled his eyes. The letter trembled in his hands. For the first time, the hole in his heart didn't feel empty. It felt raw, alive, and painfully human. Richard's voice was soft. They loved you, Daniel. They always did. Daniel nodded slowly, his tears falling onto the table. He couldn't speak. He just held the letter like it was the last piece of them he would ever have. Can love still matter when the truth comes too late? Daniel sat alone at the kitchen table long after midnight. The only light came from the small lamp above the counter, casting a golden circle over the letter that had changed everything. The paper trembled slightly in his hands, fragile and yellowed with time. His godmother's handwriting flowed across the page in soft, fading ink, every loop of every word carrying 35 years of silence. He read the letter again and again until he knew every word by heart. We did everything to protect you. The phrase haunted him. Protect him from what? When Anna appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a robe, her voice was soft. You're still up? Daniel nodded without looking up. I can't stop thinking about it. She stepped closer, resting her hand on his shoulder. Do you believe what he said? That your godparents didn't really abandon you? I don't know, he murmured. But I need to find out. The next morning, Daniel packed a small bag and drove north, 4 hours to the town where he'd grown up, the one he had avoided for decades. The closer he got, the smaller the world seemed to become. The roads narrowed. Trees leaned over the pavement like memories he couldn't shake. When he reached St. Mary's orphanage, he barely recognized it. The paint had peeled, the windows were cracked, and the playground was nothing but rusted swings creaking in the wind. For a moment he just stood at the gate, his hand resting on the same iron latch that had closed behind him as a boy. Inside, the halls smelled of dust and disinfectant. An elderly nun appeared from a side room, leaning on a cane. Her face lit up when she saw him. Daniel Brooks. I thought I'd never see you again. He smiled faintly. Hello, Sister Agnes. I always knew you'd do well, she said proudly. You were such a thoughtful child. Her warmth almost made him forget why he'd come. But the question burned too hot to ignore. Do you remember the day my godparents left me here? Her expression changed, softer, sadder. I do. It was raining. Your godmother could hardly breathe from crying. She kept saying, "We'll come back soon," over and over. Daniel swallowed hard. Did she tell you why? Sister Agnes shook her head. No. But the next day, a man came asking about you. He said he was your uncle. He wanted to take you with him. When we asked for proof, he got angry and left. Daniel frowned. Uncle? I didn't have any uncles. That's what troubled me, she said. There was something off about him. I told the police, but nothing ever came of it. Outside, Daniel stood motionless in the rain, her words echoing in his mind. A man pretending to be family. The same day after he'd been left there. Was he connected to the people who'd threatened his godparents? He pulled out his phone and called Richard. The old man answered on the third ring. "Richard," Daniel said, "did my godparents ever mention someone coming for me after they left?" There was silence, then a heavy sigh. "Yes. Daniel, there's something I didn't tell you." Daniel felt his stomach drop. "What do you mean?" Richard's voice trembled. "Your godparents didn't just owe money. They owed their lives. Michael borrowed from a man named Victor Hale. Powerful, ruthless. When he couldn't repay him, Hale didn't want money anymore. He wanted control, and he thought the easiest way was through you." "Through me?" Daniel's voice cracked. Richard hesitated. "Because you weren't just their godson, Daniel. You were their son." The words hit him like a punch to the chest. He froze in the middle of the empty road, raindrops falling against his face. "What are you talking about?" "I was there," Richard whispered. "Your parents, the ones you think died, were close friends of Michael and Teresa. But when Michael got involved with Hale, they all made a desperate choice. To protect you, they hid the truth. They raised you under your friends' names. It was the only way to keep you safe." Daniel shook his head, his voice breaking. "You're saying my entire life, everything I believed when I was a lie?" "I'm saying," Richard replied gently, "that every lie was told out of love." The rain poured harder now, blurring the world around him. Daniel felt as if the ground had vanished beneath his feet. He looked up at the gray sky and whispered to himself, "They didn't abandon me. They hid me." If the truth shattered everything you believed about your family, would you still call it love? The next morning, Daniel drove to Richard's house. His heart pounded the entire way as if every mile brought him closer not just to answers, but to the person he had been searching for his entire life. Richard lived in a small cottage at the edge of Portland, surrounded by overgrown grass and quiet woods. When Daniel knocked, the old man opened the door slowly, his eyes tired but kind. "You came," Richard said softly. "I need to know everything," Daniel replied. Inside, the house smelled of old books and rain-soaked wood. On a shelf above the fireplace, Daniel noticed framed photographs, one of Michael and Teresa smiling at a summer picnic, and another of a young boy playing near the ocean. The boy was him. "Where did you get that?" Daniel asked, his voice trembling. "From your godmother," Richard said. "She carried it everywhere, even when she knew they might never see you again." Daniel swallowed hard. "Tell me the rest. No more half-truths." Richard nodded slowly and sank into a chair. "Michael wasn't just in debt, Daniel. He worked for Victor Hale, laundering money through his construction business. When he realized Hale was using him to fund violent operations overseas, he tried to back out. That's when the threats started." "And I was a target," Daniel whispered. "Yes. Hale wanted leverage. He discovered that Michael had a child, you. So your parents, the couple you thought were yours by blood, offered to raise you under their names. They believed if your identity was hidden, Hale would never find you." Daniel's throat tightened. "So my godparents were my real parents all along?" Richard nodded, tears welling in his eyes. "They gave up everything, even their names, to keep you alive." Silence filled the room. The weight of the revelation pressed down on Daniel's chest. All those years he'd spent hating them, resenting them, were built on a lie meant to save him. Richard reached into a drawer and pulled out another envelope. "Before they left town, they gave this to me," he said. "I was supposed to give it to you when the time was right." Daniel opened it carefully. Inside was a short letter written in the same gentle handwriting as before. "Our dearest Daniel, if this letter finds you, then our love did too. We were never meant to be apart. Every mile, every day away from you was agony. But if keeping you safe meant losing you, then we would do it all over again. Remember this. Love is not measured by presence but by sacrifice." Daniel's tears fell freely now. He pressed the letter to his chest, feeling the ache of all the lost years, and the quiet peace of understanding at last. After a long silence, he looked at Richard. "Do you think they'd forgive me? For hating them? Richard smiled faintly. They never blamed you, they only ever loved you. Daniel nodded slowly. Then I'll honor them by living the life they wanted for me. He stood by the window, watching as sunlight broke through the clouds for the first time that week. It illuminated the trees outside, turning every drop of rain into something almost holy. Later, when he returned home, Anna and Lily met him at the door. His daughter threw her arms around him, and for the first time in decades, Daniel felt truly whole. "Everything okay, Dad?" she asked. He smiled gently, stroking her hair. "It is now." That night, Daniel placed both letters side by side in a small wooden box and locked it carefully. Not to forget, but to remember differently. He realized that forgiveness wasn't about erasing pain. It was about seeing love hidden beneath it. As he turned off the light, his mother's words echoed softly in his mind. Love is not measured by presence, but by sacrifice. And for the first time in his life, Daniel believed them. Sometimes the people who seem to abandon us are the ones who love us the most. If Daniel's story moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. What would you do if you discovered your entire life was built on a secret meant to save you? Share your thoughts below. Your story might help someone else heal too.